Sierra Raspberry, who is one of the original founders and creators and artist principals behind the Thousand Mermaids Project.
Yep. And
Chris O'Hare, the owner of Reef Cells and also one of the co-creators, physical builder of the actual reefs, which we'll get into in a little bit. Why don't you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves and your backgrounds and kind of how we got to this point?
Okay.
Sierra, you first.
My name's Sierra Raspberry. I'm an artist. I moved down to South Florida about 6 years ago. Me and my boyfriend and art partner, Ernest, he couldn't be here today, but I'll be talking a lot about him, I'm sure. We came together and we started making art together. And we got into body casting as our art form. So we worked with models, we turned people into sculptures, and when we were commissioned a project to do a mermaid sculpture to go on board a yacht that we spent a lot of time and money and effort. We put everything we could into this sculpture. And when we went to deliver the product, the buyer had lost his boat and filed for bankruptcy and got into a lot of trouble. So we said, well, what do we do with this sculpture? And he says, I don't care, you can throw it in the ocean, for all I care, kind of as a joke. And that was kind of when the light bulb went off, like, oh, what if we could do a mermaid sculpture in the water? And so kind of fast forward, we're the creators of this thing, and we came up with the idea of creating a sculpture garden to be able to put out into the ocean and create a really awesome place for people to view the sculptures, but also kind of educate the public about reef conservation and the importance of why artificial reefs are so important. I'll hand it over to Chris from there.
Oh, thank you. My name is Christopher Xavier O'Hare. If you need to have any additional information besides what I tell you today, my website's cxoart.com. I was born in New York City in 1954, where I started my art training. When my father passed in '67, the family moved to Florida, where I got my first dive mask and spent every moment I could swimming in every bit of water in Florida, from the Keys to Fort Lauderdale. And I could tell you in 1967, the marine life was abundant. I made quite a lot of observations and out of curiosity started experimenting with reefs. My first artificial reef I observed was a toilet someone had jettisoned off Isla Morada.
Nice.
And to my surprise, it was surrounded with marine life, and I couldn't understand that as a 13-year-old kid. It's like, what is this all about? I've since learned quite a bit about artificial reefs. My art career continued in 1988, where I did extensive studies in Europe. I formed a company where I work in collaboration with architects and now have works of art from Okinawa, Japan to Dubai, throughout the United States, on over 1,000 projects. But I've always been in love with the ocean, and the experiments I've done with artificial reefs have manifested, or I should say evolved, into a company I have now called Reef Cells. Now, when Sierra and Ernest contacted me in Reef Cells to join them on this project, I was very excited. We've already completed reefs for the Andrew Red Harris Memorial Reef off Jupiter. It's 40 units. Peanut Island in Palm Beach. There's the Phil Foster Snorkel Trail. There's quite a number of other reefs, smaller reefs. We have reefs planned in Miami as well, at Key Biscayne. It's always fascinating to make something, whether it's sculpture or a reef module, and then see what happens. And one of the keys, I think, to the whole effort here is to do that, to observe, refine, redevelop, and deploy again. And I hope when I have a chance, I'll talk more about that. But my background basically has been architectural art and marine biology enhancement.
Beautiful. So no stranger to artificial reefs. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about the why behind these projects and why they are so important at a time where we are today?
Well, everyone here in this room has an appreciation for art, and we all have our ideas about what art is. But to me, art and the creation of art is nothing more than communicating. It's creating something that sits in the environment and people react to it. It calls attention to itself. By placing art in the ocean, it not only calls attention to itself, but it also says, hey, look what's going around me, going on here. So the whole purpose of this putting art in the ocean is to call attention to the conditions in the ocean and how we can make them better or enhance them or mitigate some of the damages we're now experiencing with climate change or even shoreline development, which has impacted our offshore reefs. As I said before, in 1967, this place was teeming with aquatic life. I've seen the decline of it. I've seen multiple attempts at creating artificial reefs and how that has evolved.
And one of the things that, Sarah, we've talked a lot about is really just raising the awareness of the local population about single-use plastic and what they put in the ocean.
Mhm.
So from your local perspective as a local artist, what are some of the things that are important about the why behind the project?
The why. I mean, yeah, we definitely need to realize like what our impact is on the ocean. Something we often say is like we can look out when we're out on the beach and look at how beautiful the ocean is, but we really can't tell what's going on underwater. And like Chris was saying, like having grown up here and seeing what has declined and what has the conditions of our oceans have really gone down since just a few decades. And I really would like to get people involved and have a reason why they should pay attention to what's going on, and then get them involved. And involving them in the sculpture process kind of gives people more of a responsibility and a little bit of
Ownership.
accountability
Yeah.
and ownership of the art as well. So hopefully kind of bring attention to that.
And there's a documentary that we enjoy watching. It's very informative, called Chasing Coral.
Mhm.
And if you haven't seen it, strongly recommend it. There's entire communities around the world that their livelihood and their industry is based off of the water, fishing or other marine life. And obviously the marine industry is super important here to Fort Lauderdale. If we unfortunately don't have a thriving marine ecosystem, we might not have the yachting capital of the world anymore. This all comes at a very important time. Also, as Fort Lauderdale is redeveloping and trying to re-identify and create a brand for itself, this is going to be one of the first eco-tourism projects in Fort Lauderdale, where people are going to travel here to dive and to either get certified or many other applications and dive the reef.
Yep.
So it comes at a really good time. And if you haven't seen Chasing Coral, we strongly recommend it. It's a phenomenal documentary you can find on Netflix. Why don't we talk a little bit about, from Sierra, your perspective, the artistic elements behind the Thousand Mermaids side, and then Chris, we'll get to your perspective behind the actual science and specifics behind it.
Okay, so kind of like I was touching on, like Ernest and I were involved in body casting, and so our idea was actually to turn real people into mermaids. And we've met with a ton of people, a ton of models and everything, and their dream, like since they were a kid, everybody's told me it's like, oh, I would love to be a mermaid, pick me, that kind of thing. So the artistic point, we would like to just make a beautiful sculpture garden, and once we got involved with Chris, we kind of realized like really quickly how incredible his artistic depth is and what he can create as far as the modules go. He's given us so many different types of designs and fun things to work with, and we hope that we can provide the body cast and the people aspect of it, and that he can kind of develop the modules.
And from just one question that I know a lot of people ask is what materials are used and what's going into this. So what is the actual materials on your side that you use for body casting?
For body casting, so we use plaster as in the form of bandages, kind of like whenever you break an arm. We'll place that on the model. We'll lay several layers thick on an actual person in a pose, and we'll capture their body in the pose. That comes off as a shell, and then we can hand that shell over to Chris, and then he's able to use concrete and different materials on his end to provide the forms and everything. So maybe you can talk about some of the materials that you use.
Sure. First, I'd like to say what a pleasure it was to have their truck pull up to our studio and unload all these plaster women.
Yeah.
Because I have, there's 20 people there. They're like, wow, this is where I want to work. So I have to back up a second. We can't just dump things in the ocean.
Correct.
We work underneath the permit that the county already has with the federal government. They're the gatekeepers, and we need to do what they say and comply with the regulations, which is not a problem. Just follow the rules. One of the rules is it's got to be concrete or steel above a 1/4 inch in diameter or size, and nothing else, no plastic. Now, Palm Beach County is different, but in Broward County, what this project is, those are the rules. So we take those plaster negatives of the women and we convert them into concrete positives, and then the concrete positive is placed on the module. And then sometimes we'll embellish it with the tail or the hair or whatever else it needs, or we'll make sure we tell them in advance, here's the curvature of the module, or here's where the figure should be, either supine or reclining or what have you, and we work together in that regard. Material-wise, this is so exciting because if you know the history of artificial reefs, originally it was objects of opportunity. Someone's tearing down a bridge, well, let's throw that concrete in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an abandoned ship, okay, let's sink it. These things were no more than fish attractors. Matter of fact, FAD, fish attractive devices, the scientific, or the common name for it. That's not really good because when you attract fish, what you do is you pull them from a big area and make them easy for fishermen to harvest.
Mm-hmm.
Not smart. I mean, it's fun to dive on a ship or some other piece of land, an object you usually see on the land. It's a unique experience. But our concept was, can we create modules that are actually promote the marine environment, promote fish, increase population of fisheries. One of the things we've observed from just the form of the thing is that species have different requirements. Spiny lobster love crevices they can crawl underneath. Moray eels love interior crevices that they can anchor to. Seahorses love little spindly things they can wrap their tail around to fight against the current and stay there and eat whatever is coming by. So you have all these species-specific shapes that if we can incorporate that into the module, we can actually, we believe, increase the fishery count. One of the problems with, well, not problem, one of the facts of nature is a fish lays thousands of eggs. Those eggs then float around. When they hatch, the first thing in their mind is, I got to eat and I got to keep from being eaten. So they gravitate to anything that'll save their butts. It might be getting to some sargasso. It might be forming a tight ball to escape predation. We found if we make modules that these fish can escape some of that predation and survive to a spawning age, then the population of the fishery can expand exponentially. I mean, Fort Lauderdale used to have so much fish. There's a whole industry of people coming here to go fishing. Bahia Mar had all these boats. It's not like that anymore. You don't go to Costa Rica if you really want to fish. But it can be like that in the future, because I believe with these modules, with the science we're using now, we can actually create a tremendous fishery right offshore that will, like I said, exponentially increase the population of all those game fish. Now, modules have basically three types of organisms. You got attaching organisms that want to grow on the rock, colonize the surface, like coral, soft coral, sponges, etc. Then you have benthic organisms that aren't attached, but they like to be down there low and safe. Then you have pelagics that swim around looking for a meal, and they're basically cruising around in this great desert, which is our ocean. And anyone who's dived when most of the oceans here realize with all the sand, it is a desert. These reefs become an oasis in that desert, a place not only for the fish to congregate, but also for them to populate and to expand. They become social creatures that create an ecosystem that gets exponentially larger as we create more substrate. I got way off on a tangent because I know the question was about the science of the material.
Tell us about the science of the
So
material.
that's what I want to address first. The material now, there's so much advances in concrete science between fibers made out of volcanic rock, sizing of the aggregates so they nest tighter, water reduction chemicals that make, because concrete gets stronger when you use less water. We can now make cement veneers. You might have seen this on the internet. You could buy tables made out of concrete or bathtubs only about this thick. Well, we take that formulation, that matrix of cement, and we can create these veneers of really organic shapes with the crevices, the interstitial spaces connect to each other. And even though we've got 1,000-pound ballast base, because you need that to resist the dynamic forces under the water, we can now create tremendous amounts of complexity and tailor it for specific species because of this new material, these new engineering practices. So it's a very exciting time, and because of that, if you look at some of the modules across the road there, you'll see just how thin that concrete is. But if you bang on it, it feels ductile, like iron, or closer to a ceramic. So it's as far as material science goes, it's a very exciting time. We're on the threshold here of something great.
And on the topic of something great and advances in what separates this project from other artificial reef projects, why don't you speak a little bit to the actual materials that you're integrating to accelerate the coral growth?
Sure. Like I said before, deployment, observation, refinement, redeployment. One of the things we've discovered is that, and it's in a lot of science papers, organisms that attach to the reef, the corals, etc., love calcium carbonate. And most of the minerals that are in seawater come out of solution to bind with sand and other minerals and create the rock bottoms we see in the patch reefs. They also are used by animals to create their outer, exoskeletons. But we found that we take marble from Georgia. It's ground up. It's typically used in cultured marble, which like vanity tops that everybody had 20 years ago. Well, we take that marble, put it in a cement mixture. It's actually a CSA cement. It's not Portland. And we can spray that on the surface of these concrete modules. Now we've got, in gross terms, it's like a corn dog. Basically, that module is covered with calcium carbonate, just like your teeth. And plants, the pioneering plants you typically see on the submerged object that take over and block the attachment of other organisms that take years to finally dissipate and the other organisms come in. Well, that doesn't happen. Now the organisms can attach right away. So we can get corals and other more important species growing on these modules at a much quicker rate than if it was conventional concrete just thrown overboard. On that subject, though, this project is not in isolation. There's so much work going on around the state. There are people growing corals and for attachment to reefs. People are developing corals that resist higher temperatures because of the climate change issue. So we've developed a way too for our modules with the mermaids to have receivers where these corals that are farmed in the Keys can now be taken and those plugs can be put all over these modules and have, I don't want to say an instant reef, but a much quicker coral reef.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible. And those are some of the exciting developments, some of the exciting differentiators between this project and other projects I think people are used to seeing. So we've gotten this far. We've had some really great support from some local supporters. We couldn't go without saying a big thank you to Megan Washington, the director of the marina here at the Pier 66, who's been instrumental in giving us space to store and display the modules as an above water sculpture garden, kind of as a public art activation. The Sales Marina is across the street from the Pier 66 Marina, right here on 17th Street, right across from the port and the convention center. Megan's been instrumental in helping us get into the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show and has been instrumental in helping us get a lot of the preliminary pieces lined up to offset some of the mounting costs that these are not inexpensive artificial reef projects. But there is still so much more that's needed to bring a 6-figure, potentially 7-figure project like this to life. Why don't you speak to a little bit about what's needed to bring the project to life?
Me?
Both you guys.
What's needed? Yeah, we definitely need money. We need people involved that can help us advertise it, put it on social media. Anybody that can like and share and just spread the word. We just need to get the message out there to people. It's part of the reason we're doing this today, so we can kind of spread awareness for the whole project itself. We know that there are people out there that are able to help out, corporations that are able to help out, and so just spreading the word. And
it's really grown very organically.
Yeah.
It's been very word of mouth, very grassroots. A lot of social media support, a lot of local influencers. We have had some brands and people reach out. So Sierra, Ernest, myself, but even before we were fortunate enough to get Chris involved, have been able to lay some groundwork and some traction. We've been able to get into the Tortuga Music Festival, Riptide Music Festival events at the W. We had them last year at Art Fort Lauderdale for exposure, for brand awareness, so people can start seeing the project And as we mentioned earlier, one of the great things about raising awareness of the project is we're really trying to raise people's consciousness about single-use plastic, what they're putting in the ocean, what they're buying. Are you going to use a paper straw? And I think we've been successful in even having a few local restaurants switch to paper straws,
yeah, absolutely,
which is a win.
Yep.
So that we're able to get that far, and then Chris has been absolutely incredible with his experience, knowledge, and skill sets and resources within his existing facilities. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about what else is needed realistically within the logistics of the barge and everything to actually deploy as you've deployed projects in the past?
Sure, and we've worked on this for years, trying to find the most economical way to deliver the greatest impact to that marine ecosystem. Like I said, every time we do a deployment, we figure out, well, maybe we could cut this corner and put some of the emphasis there. But either way, refine it so not only does it transport easier, deploy easier, is more stable, but is more productive. Now, it's like any manufacturing business, you're always trying to find the bottlenecks, get rid of them, and make your product the most efficient it can be. And we've done that, and we've had great success. And I'd also like to say I'm grateful for all the people that have contributed to this project, because a lot of people, without wanting any kind of recognition, have really stepped forward. And that's one of the great things about being alive. People come to you with a problem, and if it's in your power to help them, wow, that just feels great. And I felt really great when they came to me, and I was more than happy to donate so much that we donated. A lot of people think, well, why doesn't the government just pay for it? Broward County, they're going to benefit, right? I mean, they're going to have more tourism. Everybody's going to make money. The ripples in the pond are going to expand from restaurants, gas stations, hotels, etc. But government, if you've ever been to a meeting, you'll see that there's 1,000 people with their hands out, and they got to justify it. Okay, we can spend money on reef. That means we take it away from widows and children, or whatever the rationale is. And those are all important projects, but we have to realize we're standing in line for a piece of a pie when the real pie, the population, the people that care about the ocean, that's where the money is. And if we can monetize the reef by sponsorship, where your name goes on a module, or your image is on one of the mermaids, or however we could figure out to do it, that's what we're working on now. As far as making a project like this happen, it's not always about money. When we've had modules up in Jupiter and off Palm Beach put in the water, people started coming out of the woodwork. People took videos, they promoted it, went over social media, more people got on board, and the buzz creates more enthusiasm and more awareness of the problem, which is really the whole purpose of this thing, is be aware of the problem and find ways to fix it, because a lot of smart people, like this climate change thing, I mean, there's a lot of people working on that, and there's a lot of mitigating things that can be done. So as far as the money is, it's really, it reminds me of the Statue of Liberty. Okay, France gives us this beautiful statue. Bartholdi designs it. They ship it over to New York. They don't have enough money for the base, so it turns out all the kids and everybody puts in their pennies. They build this base. It takes about 10 years. And I think a grassroots financing campaign like that is really the best one. And campaigns only work when there's enough energy and people talking about it in the buzz. And I'm thinking that's probably what's really going to make this thing work.
And we have, so we have had some success, and we're super appreciative of the people that have supported the project initially. One of the organizations that we've aligned with is the CDTC, the Children's Diagnostic and Treatment Center, located in Fort Lauderdale here. They do some of the most instrumental work for not just underprivileged and underserved families in the community. They treat the babies that are born with AIDS, and they do provide a lot of very valuable services. Megan Washington, the director of the marina here, is very well involved and had us get involved to support and kind of make a wish come true for a very special child that they take care of named Miracle. That's her name. Born premature, wasn't able to walk, never thought she was going to be able to walk. They've been able to provide some phenomenal care, and ultimately they got to a point where she said she always wanted to be a mermaid. So when Megan got us involved with that project, not only were we able to bring mermaids to her kind of holiday gift extravaganza, where she was able to get a mermaid kind of experience.
Yeah,
And
she had a mermaid actress like come in, and they had a big meeting where they did a big reveal. The mermaid was there. They got to meet her. She got to sit in her lap.
she had her own tail.
She got her own tail. She got a trip to Disney World, and then we announced the project and how we were going to get involved for Miracle. And so we've set up a GoFundMe campaign just dedicated to Miracle's Reef, to where if we raise enough money to be able to provide a module for her, any money that's raised over that for that GoFundMe campaign, half of it's going to go to the CDTC, and the other half is going to go towards the Mermaid Project. So if there's anybody out there that wants to donate for the Miracles Reef, you can go to thousandmermaids.com, and it's on the homepage where you just hit Miracles Reef.
Yeah, so she's phenomenal. We were able to intertwine her into some other things we did with the boat show. But Chris, with regards to this being 1,000 mermaids and having such a large drop zone and having different sections, what do you see as either future applications or future just variations of either sectioning off a Miracles Reef section or even just bringing these projects other places? How do you see these projects kind of evolving out of just 1,000 mermaids?
Well, this might be the caffeine talking, but I see Fort Lauderdale having basically a metropolis of habitat. To put out a few modules and call attention to it, and you're basically creating a fish attractor, like I mentioned before. In order for something to work cohesively, I believe it's got to be as large as possible and grow exponentially. So from an aesthetic point, or to organize it in your mind, this could be broken up into zones with sponsorship or with style, since it is an art reef. But basically, however it's formed, it needs to grow as large as possible. And it's not just, we found in our observations, it's not just the holes and spaces inside a reef that create habitat, it's the gaps between the modules as well. So by organizing these things, and also there's a curiosity factor. If you come to Fort Lauderdale as a destination dive and you go out to this thing and there's alleys and there's focal points and branches out, and sort of like L'Enfant, when he laid out Washington, you have this wonderful plan with high points, low areas, etc. It's just such a wonderful opportunity to create something that inspires you intellectually, as well as creating habitat and creating a greater fisheries.
And while we are obviously very focused on Fort Lauderdale locally here, there are other parts of the world that could benefit from these advances. What are some of the potential applications that Reef Cells is able to develop and deploy for the Bahamas or other places that, in terms of distribution and deployment?
We've experimented with that quite a bit. We've come up with scenarios where we create the modules here and put them in a shipping container, or we create the module parts for final assembly, say in the Caymans. But it's really a site-specific type of thing. You have to look at the requirements of a particular site, the kind of manpower and equipment that's available at that site, because a lot of these places don't have what we have here in the States, and you have to adjust your manufacturing process accordingly. But there is a potential to export this to other areas that need it even more. We got a call just last week from a fellow in New Jersey that has an outfall pipe off some little town on the coast, and they wanted to create modules there to capitalize on all the fish that come to the outfall to feed. So you never know where the opportunity is going to come from, but there is an opportunity to expand this outward. But right now the focus is on Broward County, and this is such a great place to start this whole project.
Yeah, it comes at a time where it really is needed. We take so much from the ocean and from our marine ecosystem, but what are we really giving back? So this is a great opportunity for people to think about that. And if nothing else, if we're not able to drop this 1,000 Mermaids project, not able to drop these modules, God forbid, I think we've at least succeeded in raising people's awareness and raising people's consciousness, once again, about the situations plaguing the waters, single-use plastic, using paper straws instead of plastic straws. And hopefully, if one person can make one conscious decision, that these are the things that start to mount to have a butterfly effect of sorts that could hopefully help, really make a bigger impact. We'll open up for a little question and answer. I know we have some marine biologists in the audience here. Anybody have any questions, Ms. O'Hare?
I see the benefit from so many perspectives, from the marine life perspective, from ecotourism. On the ecotourism sector, do you see these reef modules being placed at a depth where they would be available not only to divers but just snorkelers, to glass bottom boats, things like that? Because if I'm not a diver, can I still benefit, and see what's been placed down there?
Well, we actually have a way for you to view it now before it's even built. We teamed up with a really cool company called Mermaids Studios, and they made a virtual reality reef for us. So we actually provided them some girl models to come into their studios. They 3D scanned these girls. They've modeled them into mermaids in this environment, and then they created a kind of swim through experience where you put on the virtual reality goggles, or you can even view it on your phone at home or your iPad or whatever you've got. So you can kind of see what it would potentially look like. And it's really cool because it's a 2-minute presentation, and over the 2 minutes it goes from just being dropped to what it's going to look like in maybe 5 or 10 years. And so that's one way. If you don't even want to get near the water, you can check it out on your phone.
And the coral grows over the 2 minutes progressively.
Correct, yeah. So that's one way to experience it. I definitely hope that glass bottom boats would be an option for people. We've talked to a lot of dive companies around here, and the place where they take people out every 2-3 times a day is going to be the same area right off Fort Lauderdale Beach. So hopefully you'll be able to see it.
You want to speak to the actual drop zone and the depth and the
Yeah, so what the permit allows for us to do is to drop in about 40 feet of water. That's a depth at which it's pretty visible in our waters here in Fort Lauderdale. 40 feet is just right at the cutoff where if there's a hurricane or if there was a big storm, that the modules wouldn't get knocked over or damaged or anything like that. And what else?
3/4 of a mile.
Yeah, it's going to be right near the Hugh Taylor Birch State Park, Fort Lauderdale kind of area, about 3/4 of a mile out into the ocean. So that's the area that's designated for us to drop.
And I know you mentioned the federal government. Do you want to just speak to the actual logistics of the Army Corps engineer? I know people always like to ask about who owns it and who's responsible for it.
Sure, but first I'd like to answer that question as
Sure.
well. Every reef we've ever built, it doesn't take any time at all before there's 100 videos on YouTube. Divers, people we don't know, they just, there's a lionfish, there's a moray eel, there's a manta ray, and then they tag it with the reef name. So anyone who wants to experience a reef from the comfort of their home, just go on your computer. The issue, though, of reefs that you could snorkel on as opposed to dive is the one I've always been concerned about, because I prefer snorkeling. And there are areas where we've done that. On Peanut Island up in Palm Beach, there's opportunity at Hillsborough Inlet, Rickenbacker Causeway, places where clean ocean water comes into the estuary and you have beautiful visibility. We could put reefs there in 10 to 12 feet of water, as long as they're outside of the navigation channels. And if they're close to a park, that's even better because people have ready access. The issue with putting reefs close to shore in the beach is, let me back up. At one time, I was a turtle monitor volunteer. We would walk the beach, look for turtle nests, etc. When those turtles hatch, and it's a beautiful thing to see them dig out of the sand and go scurrying across, if there are birds around, they pick them off. Once they reach the water, they make a mad dash for the closest piece of sargassum or anything floating around that they can cling on to to escape predation. When you put an artificial reef or anything, or even if there's hard surface existing patch reef near the beach with fish, it's like a gauntlet those poor turtles have to swim past. So in the science community, you have this conflict. You got people who want to do the artificial reefs close to shore, but you got turtle people saying, no, got to protect the hatchlings. So and that I can understand, but that's the main reason why the permitting agencies want those reefs to be in about 40 feet of water. The other issue too is littoral drift. Sand coming down from the Carolinas comes along our coast. In the summertime, it all comes close to shore, and you'll notice the water is pretty shallow. In the wintertime, the waves change direction and that board is scoured out, exposing a lot of the hard rock, which is another reason for our reef modules, because they have a high enough elevation, they don't get covered with the rock. So all the caulerpa and the other organisms that attach to these things don't get buried by the sand. That doesn't happen when you're further offshore. So you avoid that littoral drift issue, and you save the hatchlings, and unfortunately, snorkelers have to suffer and can only go swimming in the estuary areas, which there'll be plenty of opportunity for that. If you look on Google Earth at the coastline of Florida and look for all the clear water that's inside at Rickenbacker or off Key Biscayne or No Name Harbor, etc., you'll see lots of opportunities to create snorkel reefs inshore where they're not going to impact turtle hatchlings.
And in regards to the question that I know people always ask, like who's responsible, who owns the, who owns the permit?
Yeah, permit processing is really important. You can't just dump anything in the ocean. Although as a kid I used to and had a lot of fun, but that was back then. So the Army Corps of Engineers basically is in charge of monitoring. NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, has a hand in it too. These people usually leave it to the county. Now, up in the Panhandle, they create a lot of private reefs. I don't know how they get away with that. But down here, you're smiling because you probably know what I'm talking about. Down here, you have to use the county as the gatekeeper because the counties are the one that have the permits. They have designated areas, and I don't know how they determine those areas. I think it has to do with how deep the hard bottom is below the sand level, because you don't want to put something that's going to disappear. But the Army Corps through the counties, and then to us. So we do everything we can through the county. We follow their rules. We use their permits, and we comply with all that regulation.
And our contact at the county, Angel Rivera, has been absolutely phenomenal and instrumental in helping ease this process along to the point where pretty much as soon as we get the funding, we're good to go.
Yeah, Angel was he was one of our first people. When we came up with the idea, we were like, okay, we did the research, like, oh, we're gonna have to meet with the county to see what this is all about. So Ernest and I, we bring our mermaid sculpture into the county office. We make a little PowerPoint, and we're all excited, and we talked to all of them. Pretty much everybody kind of laughed at us in the room and told us this is an arts and crafts project. It's not going to go anywhere, and we don't have any money for you. So, but Angel said, you know what? You guys are cool. We can't give you any money right now because we don't have the resources available. But, you let me know if you make something happen. So he was one of the first people that really kind of supported us in whatever ways he could. He's been a person that we can call if we've got really important questions. It's been great. So big shout out to Angel for supporting us from the beginning.
Yes.
I think it's really fascinating. I think that it's well thought out. I think you're articulate. Certainly you're extremely knowledgeable. Is your plan, if you had the resources, to actually drop all 1,000 mermaids at one time? Or if you don't have the resources to do that, would you do it in pieces, like maybe starting with Miracles Reef? Because you could create a tremendous amount of publicity around something like that.
Absolutely. So this was the whole idea, was to do it in phases. From a financial standpoint, we're definitely, I don't think we're gonna get $10 million handed to us tomorrow so we can drop all 1,000 sculptures at once. But yeah, Miracles Reef would be a great pilot program for us, and a good reason for her to raise money for the CDTC and kind of get us off the ground and into the water. And the reason we chose the name 1,000 Mermaids originally was, from an artistic standpoint, it's like I can make one sculpture at a time and I can go forth. But for me to leave a legacy behind, I feel like I would need to do something really big and kind of almost impossible, but not totally impossible. So 1,000 Mermaids was just kind of a crazy idea for us at that point. It sounded good, and I said, we shouldn't just put 100 sculptures out there. We should put 1,000 sculptures and see where it goes.
And also realistically, you can only fit so many on the barge at one time. And then also, while Chris has phenomenal facilities and warehouses, you could only build so many. You care to mention just about the production timeline and how long, in a best case scenario, production?
Well, the basic module and its different aspects, different types of modules for different species. When we are serious about it and we gear up for production, we can do one a day. And that's because, you have them in different stages, but they average at the end of the month about one a day. And we can store about 40 modules on our site. Pier 66 is very generous in letting us stage modules next door here. And typically the way it works is modules are delivered, they're staged on land. The barge, an ocean-going barge, would handle about 40 modules at a time. It has to be large enough to hold a crane and be stable out in the water. So basically 40 modules would be staged, put on the barge, waiting for the proper weather and sea conditions, and then they'd go out. And then another, you can get 6 modules on a truck. Trucks can come down all day long, so we can pretty much populate that staging area rather quickly. There's also a lot of areas available, people who are willing to donate their vacant land or property to stage those modules waiting for deployment. So really, there's an economy of scale like in most everything, and putting 1-2 modules out, it's expensive. Putting 40 modules out, the price starts dropping a lot. So really, we want to try to aggregate deployments and get more bang for the buck.
And one of another partner in support of the project, Rocco from IDC, Industrial Divers Corporation, offered to donate his barge to deploy the first 3 modules.
Rocco, they are part of the group that goes out into the ocean, and they have a training program for I think it's the Army divers. And they pick up the tires that were left back in the 70s. There was about 2 million tires that were dropped in the ocean for a artificial reef program. Back then, didn't work out so well. But they go out and they fish out these tires. And so whenever they go out with an empty barge that they would normally fill up with tires and then come back, they've offered to bring our modules out, drop the modules, they pick up their tires, and they come back. Since they're going out to the site anyway, they've offered to help us out with the barge cost, because that can be very, very expensive to get the engineers and the barge.
So can't thank Rocco, obviously Megan as well, John Nagro with Informa and the boat show, allowing us to stage modules at the entrance to the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show. We can't even speculate what that would cost, but they let us do that for free. That was phenomenal. A bunch of people, Apache, Celebration of the Seas, allowing us to be in the eco village at Riptide.
Riptide Inn.
And then also at Tortuga as well. And Angel with the county. MISF has been, kind in their support and blessing. And also, I would say the general consensus of the Fort Lauderdale community, especially the people involved in the Beach Council, and even to the extent people involved with the tourism board, Ina Lee, everybody's all for it. It's just a matter of who's gonna strike that check, which will come in time, as all good projects do. Any other questions?
I think she had a question.
Yeah, you told me about $10 million that I heard one time.
I was just throwing a figure out there. I mean, price per module. Do you want to talk about?
I just wanted the timeline and also the
Sure.
that's desired for the strategic plan.
The size of the module is limited by getting down I-95, or if we make it in place here, just how much the barge can pick up. Industrial divers, their barge can handle 1,500 pounds. I prefer modules 2,000 to 3,000 pounds, because the last thing you want is for that thing to move and threaten the natural reef. So it's got to be really stable. We make a low profile module we've developed, which is about this tall, which is great because you can put 3 of them, one on top of the other inside of a shipping container. A medium sized module will go double, and then a high profile module that's about 7 feet tall, which is just great. So of course the price is dependent on the size. Right now we haven't set a price because we believe with mass production, because we've really been building lots of forms and shapes and things to create these pieces, that we can get the cost way down. So I'm reluctant to tell you how much it's cost us now, but I really feel confident it's going to be much lower by the time we get to a deployment time.
We have identified an individual sponsorship level of $7,500 that you can have a reef in your name or in your company's name. And that's another application of the project, very similar to how the Riverwalk, you can donate a dedicated brick to your family or your corporation. for all intents and purposes, there will be sections of the project where it'll be in memory of, you know, so and so, and you can have a plaque, even if you weren't the person that was particularly body casted, that you supported the project in that way and have your legacy live on forever on the ocean floor.
Adopt a mermaid.
Exactly.
Correct.
Exactly.
There are also opportunities too for people that do want to be body casted and do want to be part of the project, either to just have a cast for yourself, and it's a very artistic process that Sierra does in her studio locally here. So there are opportunities for that either you can have the cast for your own personal use, or we could potentially, if you want to, have that cast actually be applied to the project once it's deployed.
I'd like to add one other thing. The company Reef Cells builds these reefs. We buy the raw material, we have the labor, administrative costs, taxes, insurance, all that other stuff. The actual cost of the module, as we can bring it further down, is going to be less than what he's talking about, but that difference in price is going to go back into the project because there's the barge, there's divers that have to supervise, there's promotional material, so a lot of cost, but there's not, I don't want to say there's profit there. We're covering our cost at Reef Cells. We're not making a profit on that. The difference is going back into the project.
Correct.
Yeah. The idea is to make a lot of them, you know, and the more you make, the more the cost goes down. It's just, you know, if someone wants to donate for one module, that's great and all, but if we can get a lot of donations at once to do a bigger drop, that would be more financially stable. The idea is to get as much out there as we can. Do you have a question?
So have you established a 501c3 to fund this?
Not yet. And
Because if you expect people to write checks, or you expect corporations to fund it, that's really what you would need to do. Not that you can't take salaries out of it to, you know, to provide a living, but you really should. If you haven't, you really should. That would really give you a little more.
And that's actually something that I wanted to touch on, the bigger picture and the grander scheme of this thing. Ideally, would love to have the 1,000 Mermaid Fund, university, scholarship, summer camp, where kids come here for 2 weeks and learn how to do coral transfers and learn how to make reefs and be part of the process and education opportunities and all of these other applications that will come in time, integrating with Nova Southeastern University when the time comes for education opportunities with their students and graduates, integrating with the Guy Harvey Institute, integrating with the MISF, integrating with the Sky's the Limit. There is another thing I wanted to mention. Many of you, if you're in this room, I'm sure I've seen Jason DeCaris Taylor's reef in Cancun, Mexico, of the people holding hands. I've seen some reports estimate that when that reef was deployed, 50% of their tourism traffic, of the economic impact, actually went to people going to dive that reef. So and of course that's in Cancun, Mexico, and we have a lot more here in Fort Lauderdale. But there's a lot to gain: education opportunities, economic impact, ecotourism, the actual impact that we discussed, obviously, with the oceans and creating jobs. And I mean, the sky really is the limit. Anything else that on that topic you would want to add?
Yeah, I'm excited about it, and I'm really excited that this, I believe, is all coming from art. That it's that part of us, that creative part, that not only creates it but appreciates it, which is, I hope, going to be the driving force that creates this new environmental enhancement we'll have. Because, you know, I remember living in Las Olas years ago, and some people got the idea, let's plant some oak trees, and they look like spindly little things. But now, years later, there's a beautiful neighborhood with these giant oaks, and I could see these modules and this project years and years from now, people looking back and think, oh my gosh, look what we did. And look how productive this is, and look where all these fish came from and all these tourists. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, the sky is the limit. We do want to say a thank you. So this talk is part of an artDiscourse series, a series of free artist talks as part of Art Fort Lauderdale, the Art Fair on the Water. which is the first art fair in the world that takes place in luxury waterfront homes on the Los Olas Intercoastal Waterways, only accessible via boat. That starts on Thursday through Sunday from the dock here at the marina. The goal with the artDiscourse series is to connect you, interested community members, with brilliant minds, some of which were flying in from Paris, France, the curator of the Brooklyn Museum, one of the directors from Americans for the Arts, so that we can give our community front row access to these minds and to this knowledge for free, locally, so that you can be part of the dialogue and be part of the discourse, hence artDiscourse. That greater scale of the series of talks and flying speakers is made possible by the Community Foundation's Frank and Helen Stoic Fund. So we obtained a grant, thankfully, from the Community Foundation of Broward to not only facilitate flying in the speakers, but also videotaping and recording these talks so that we can use this knowledge and this discourse and this conversation to be used in the future for other applications, and hopefully people will discover this on YouTube and learn from this and get inspired and maybe create their own reef. Or who knows where the sky is the
Or
limit.
help us make ours first.
Or help
We've
us
done a
make
lot
it.
of legwork
Yeah,
already.
Yes, sir.
Your knowledge is amazing. Your
So-
knowledge about your project, the way you describe it in a few words, in a few minutes, is just opens doors to my head. And I'm curious to know, where is there a place that I can know more about, is it physical place? Is there an internet website, a connection? I know there's a website for your project,
Yeah.
but of yours, plural.
There's a lot of information on my website, cxoart.com. You can get a lot of information about what we've talked about from NOAA's website, NOAA. They have a lot of information about that. Broward County, Palm Beach County, even, believe it or not, Walton County up in the Panhandle. Tremendous amount of information about artificial reefs. But this new technology, the science of this new concrete chemistry, you're not going to find that much about that because it's also brand new. And it's usually not associated with reefs. It's got more of an industrial architectural practice. But there's a lot of reef information there from NOAA. And again, cxoart.com, you'll see behind the scenes of us making the modules and the different methods we use for sand casting and laminating over that, or creating thin veneers that we then assemble together. Yeah, you're welcome to visit that.
Also, as a public artist, guess what's on my mind?
I'm sorry.
As a public artist, guess what's on my mind?
Good. It's fun when minds get together.
Last question, and I'll have something exciting for you.
I just have a quick comment. I think when I was reading about the project, it was exciting just to get the idea of the mermaids and everything. I've been doing some research, but I come from a different perspective also in the local community. I'm a swimmer, and I have a group, open water swimmers. So we swim in Delray, and we swim about a half a mile just to see the wreck. We call it our fish tank. As you know, that there is some wreck of a ship there in Delray. So we swim. We only swim. We don't have any special equipment. We're swimmers. We get there, so the conditions are right. We can see it, and that's our little area. Then we just touch base, and then we go back. So it's end up swimming about 1.5 miles or 2 miles, whatever it is. But it's just like very important for us. So for me especially, but in person, and because it's like going to a park. You don't want trash in that park.
Sure.
And you want to have the trash in little bins and things like that. We go to the ocean, we don't want to have trash. And we get trash. We do trash not only creating the awareness of what we use and what it goes into the ocean, but that's a place that we use almost every day.
Yeah.
If the conditions are good, I check the ocean conditions every day. They're good, I'm there. In the morning, I call somebody to go swim with me. I know people that are surfing or whatever they're doing. There's always something to do. And unfortunately, we find trash. That's what it gets us stuck sometimes with the seaweed in my hair. It could be like a little piece of plastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I have to go wash it and take it off like this. So it's a lot of things, that we see every day in the ocean. And as a swimmer, it's like really important that it's a good place. I mean, we don't put lotions, we don't put certain things, we don't use certain things, we don't bring things to the beach because they could be blown on into the water. So, I mean, I love the concept, I love the project. If there's something I can be part of this, also promoting the sense of community, it's for me very important.
Absolutely.
Because that's how we bring people to promote the sport of swimming, but also promote the awareness of being in water and promote how water and us, as our experience with the ocean, is so important. So I work with another organization, it's Diversity in Aquatics. So we promote with underrepresented communities here in South Florida to learn how to swim, but to be in water. That's what our main purpose is.
You'd be amazed at how many people don't know how to be just
Exactly.
good people on the ocean. You know, people bring their plastic bags and they blow off their boats. And next thing you know, a sea turtle's eating it.
Yeah, so we want to create that awareness as well. I'm not a super swimmer and I never won any Olympic contest or anything. I'm just a new swimmer that helps other people understand our connection to the water. So that's what I want to tell you, and hopefully I can be part of this movement.
You're part of it.
Yeah, thank you for being such a good person on the water. You know, that really is important. We need more people like you to, you know, talk to others. I mean, I've stopped so many people on the beach that just throw their cigarette butts or they just leave their cups behind or whatever. And you know, come here, take that, put it in the trash. It's like it's